Welcome to the Chattervast podcast. I'm your host, Chad. Thanks for joining me today, and I am letting you know about a new channel that I've started over on Rumble. If you notice, I've done some YouTube shorts over here just to give some daily thoughts. I hope you've been able to see or listen to those if you've been on podcasting. Of course, I've been putting those out there. Now, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about Rumble. It's an alternative to YouTube. I just opened up a channel over there. I'll be pushing out some new content there that will not be going currently to my podcasting channel or to YouTube, so that'll be unique. I'll put a link in the description. You go check it out if you want to, and that'll be some other things I talk about. It did start off with a political-related episode at the beginning, but more about unity and stuff like that. So if you want to go check out some other thoughts I have over there, I'll be pushing out shorter videos, just some discussion over there as well. So today I want to talk a little bit about learning and education because I've been thinking about this. I run a small YouTube kids channel, mostly compilation videos with music for kids to watch animals and vehicles, digging machines, trains, and things like that. But I want to push it more into an educational realm at some point. We'll be doing some public domain children's stories and talking or reading those. And then at some point, I'd love to do something more educational. Given that, I have to learn a little bit more about education, how people learn. And I had something that I had learned about, I don't remember, several months ago regarding how people learn and how to retain some of that information and my thoughts on that. So I want to talk a little bit about the types of learners. There's there's a lot on this particular, I think it was like 6, something like that, on this particular website, timeforlearning.com. And then, of course, if you read around, there's all kinds of sites that say all kinds of different things about how people learn. So obviously, there's a visual or spatial learner. They have people who, which I've always heard that visual and spatial were different things, but as far as like boys are more spatial as far as they can build Legos and figure out how things architecturally work, but visual is more like seeing something happen. I think I don't fall in that one as much, but so here's one of the types of learning that you have, and these people do pretty well, like just seeing things in classrooms or even via video. You have visual learners, and this site says visual learners are those who prefer learning by observing things using pictures, images, diagrams, whiteboards, and more. Helps these types of learners understand information better. And I'm going to be going through this because I want to talk a little bit about homeschooling or education and education via online for my kids program. And these students can easily visualize information, have good sense of direction, usually likes to draw and noodle. So I guess there's some aspect of like artistic side to those people. And I definitely come from an artistic background. I studied graphic design in college and I do art stuff, but I don't view myself as very good at that. But I'm still working on it. I have at least the basics, like I design my own logos and things for all the channels that I run at this point. So I do have some skill in it, but definitely not the best. You could probably pay somebody and they come out with a much better product than I would. So I feel like to some degree I do fall a bit into this visual thing because I have the drawing and doodling background. So this is a good thing to keep in mind of people who like visually learn. Then you have auditory, oral learners, those who sound music, strong suit for these types of learners who typically have a good sense of rhythm. These learners are usually singers and musicians who are familiar with different instruments and the sounds they make. I'm assuming these people are like the pitch perfect people that fall into here, which that's a whole nother, I should talk about that another time, like how pitch perfect is actually like something you can learn and not necessarily like just innate genetic ability all the time. So then you have another verbal, linguistic, they prefer using words both in speech and writing. So you're going to see like as these learners are listed out, you can pair that's the type of profession this person, I'm assuming this person becomes like an artist or this person becomes like an actor or an English teacher or something like that. You can pair some of those. The way that somebody learned is probably also correlates to their vocation later in life. You have physical kinesthetic learner where they touch and move. And I relate to that when I want to learn something. Like if I have a job doing something, I learn best not being told or seeing it on a picture, unless it's like a video of them doing it, is doing it myself. I really have to hands-on, even though I have like drawing backgrounds and stuff. And I apparently talk a lot because that's what people told me. And I also run all these YouTube channels where I'm talking a lot. And I think everybody falls under multiple categories, but I feel like the way that I learn, and that's what we're talking about right now in today's episode, is education and learning. I fall more into the physical moving and touching things and figuring out how they move and work, which I think engineers and people fall under that category a lot more often, like parts moving and handling and figuring out how everything turns, which that target is very difficult to hit with an online medium. You can have the verbal, you can have the auditory, you can have the visual for other people, but it's very difficult to hit this target, I think, with an online, unless you ship them something to learn with, which is kind of be a little bit of a caveat with what I'm presenting as an educational material online. So you also have like logical, social, and solitary, which I don't feel like these fall into the above categories. As far as like social, solitary are somewhat opposites in a way in my brain, like social interacting with others, and solitary just like with yourself, and then logical is like more reasoning, and I don't think those fall into the previous category. So I'm gonna like stick mainly with these 4 normal ones that I've heard of: the visual, oral, verbal, and physical. Now my educational idea does pertain, like I said, to visual, oral, and verbal more often, but I think I also want to hit an aspect of bringing in the family. So before I go and talk about another aspect of the education, I just wanted to go through some of these things, because if you haven't heard them, then you're not going to really understand like the importance of what I'm trying to suggest with an educational channel. So before we talk about that, here's the sponsor of the day is Stormlord. It's from Colors from Around the World. It's one of the designs that I put up for a mask. So if you still see the COVID resurgence, the coronas that are out there, go get yourself a mask. You can go pick up this, or you can also go to Colors from Around the World, where I have a lot of colors, a lot of designs over on Teespring. Well, there's not just Colors from Around the World. Apparently, like, I also have them on apparel, t-shirts, phones, things like that. But I also have a lot of masks on there as well. You can check that out. So this is one thing that I've talked about is how to retain 90% of everything you learn. This article talks about this. And it's the idea that when you did something or learned something, and I'm not going to read this whole article because they start talking about like numbers and a bucket that you're like filling up and stuff, but I'll put a link in the description. You can go read it. If you use that information right away, you will retain it at a much higher level. Just like the idea that like if you sleep right after you study something, you retain that information. I don't really understand why that is, and I'm not going that direction with this education thing, but I want to focus on interacting with other people and using information that you just learned. So this is my idea. I don't really want to go and write a textbook. That is a lot of work. I already know there are textbooks out there that are very good, especially for like history or English or something like that. It's going to be harder to do an English lesson online that's outside of just like learning words and vocabulary and how to say things. It's going to be hard to do the part where you have to like handwrite or things like that. I don't think I'd be able to target that age group at a younger age with learning things like very basic sentence structure and how to write words. But we could focus on people who want, whose kids want to learn history or science or information-based learning, where you're focusing on lots of information. There's a lot of stuff I learned in school that I don't remember or remember and never use. And for some weird reason, I do remember it, I think, because I used it during school, but I don't use it anymore. But we're going to be focusing on that information, especially historical information, in my example here. So I go find textbook, or I think anybody could do this. You find a textbook, and I think for a child, we are so strongly in the educational format where everybody sit down, shut up, and just look at me, and I'm just going to talk at you a bunch, and y'all are going to get tested on this later. I didn't really care for that format myself, and I don't know that that is the best, because you're not giving them a chance to use it. Yeah, okay, maybe a month down the road, you're giving everybody a chance to take an exam or something. I really appreciated the classes that took a quiz at the end of the class so that you could remember that information right away and use it right then. So going along those lines, here's this. get a history textbook and record 15-minute long videos, just going through the book at whatever pace. You can cover bold terms and the important things of the history in 15-minute videos that the child would take once a day, Monday through Friday. And at the end of that 15-minute video, you say, okay, now it's your turn. Now, this is another point that I would love to hit with an educational source is parental involvement, especially if you're educating your children at home. You're already at home with them, so you can do this. It'd be a lot harder if you're like, oh, I want to like educate my child for free on YouTube videos online, and you already have a full-time job. Obviously, like, you need somebody to watch your kid, but my idea for this education platform would require that you have several people who are actively involved in the child's life, in what they're learning, not teaching it to them, just hearing what they're learning, basically, and having a discussion with the kids. Because I think regarding some other disunity and problems in America, the family unit is broken to some degree, and we need to focus on having interactions with our kids and also with them interacting with their parents and with their grandparents and other siblings and then other family members. So this would encourage that by, at the end of that 15-minute mark, whether it be history or whatever you've just learned, it'll say, okay, now's the time where you pause the video and you go and you talk to the parent first and you tell them all the things that you learned in this 15 minutes, which obviously for the parent, yeah, it could be annoying that like if your kid has 6 classes that day and every like 15, 20 minutes they come and talk to you about what they just learned, that takes time, but it's an interaction with your child that's really valuable and you should be having that. And so they're just going to straight up just tell you what information they learned. Then they'll come back, they'll hit play, and the video will say, okay, did you get these things? Did you hit these things? Did you talk about these things? Do you remember these things? And they can just, oh yeah, hey, like, oh yeah, these were the highlights of what we talked about. So that would just be like another 2-minute segment of like, here was the gist of what we talked about. Did you tell your parents these things? Okay, now here's another part. And again, this takes involvement from family members or other people. Now's the time for you to video chat with somebody or call somebody on the phone and have a discussion about it. Like, not just like, hey, here's the things that you just learned, but tell them about it. And I think it would be preferable for a grandparent, or at least my experience with my grandparents is they do have insight into some things, especially historical things, and a different perspective, and they're willing to have a discussion. And I think it would be great because a lot of grandparents probably want to hear from their grandchildren. I'm just targeting them because I think this could be a really good niche to hit for those kids to have interactions with. And also open them up because then you don't have to like do speech class because they're already talking to other people. So then they would go and video chat or phone call with somebody and have a discussion about some of the material, historical material, whatever they learned. And so that would just be your lesson right there. Learning something in about 15 minutes, telling somebody about it, and then having a discussion about it, or being recapped, then having a discussion about it. And then in the description, I'll also have a link to like PDFs for those lessons, and you just print it out, and it would be a short quiz about that information that you just learned there. And then after 1 month, you'd have a full like long test or something, or maybe after a week, you'd have a full test. And I think it's more important to take that information and immediately use it, because if you can reiterate it and have a discussion over it, you definitely know it more than if you just learned it for a test, took the test, and then it was over, like it just one and done, it's out of your brain. But if you have to use it or talk to somebody about it, you're adding another voice into the conversation. That's not just a teacher telling you information, but if you're telling somebody else this information, then they're going to have a perspective on it, and that will probably stick it better in the child's brain. Or at least I'm thinking it from an adult way, but I'm also looking back at my childhood and trying to think it from that way, like, oh, I think that probably would have worked. And I also built relationships with people in my life. And maybe obviously you may not have family, you may have just friends or other people, but you need to find somebody else in this program to interact with the kids for them to learn things. So I don't know, those are my ideas there. Obviously, I'm not an educator to some degree. I mean, I guess in some way everybody is. You're always teaching somebody, as they say. You're leading or being led by somebody. But I think I have enough information there to find other people. Maybe I wouldn't be the one teaching on the thing because like history's not my forte or any of these, and I'm not a teacher. But I think I'd like to come at it from a different approach and give people connections, because when you get done all of your educating and learning things, it's all about humanity and interacting with other people in the end, because you need to go and take all these things to get a job or whatever you're going to do with that information and interact with people based on these things. I don't know. based on is the correct word, but you are going to learn these things and then go use that to interact with other people. So that's what I have for you today. Thanks for listening. I know we're off track from my normal Chattervast where we hit a bunch of different topics, but hopefully that is unique and something to talk about. I'd like to, if you're interested in doing something like that or being involved in a project like that, let me know. Put a comment or something below. Subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a review on podcasting. And if you want to support the show, you can go to Teespring and buy some merch there, or Patreon, and we'd love to have it. Also, Rumble, you can check out. I have unique content going up over there. I'll put links in for all this stuff in the description, and we will see you guys later.